Hey guys, welcome back. We have a great question for you and one that I know applies to every single one of you. So here is that question. How do you handle rejection, both in the moment when talking to a new girl and the bigger picture perspective doing cold approach and online game? Okay, this is a great question because if you're not getting rejections, you're not doing game, okay? If you haven't been out there and tried and failed, you probably also haven't been out there and tried and succeeded. So if you haven't failed yet, get off your ass and go fail a little bit. All right, so I'm going to answer this question in two ways. First of all, I'm going to answer in an intermediate way how to not let your rejections and failures get you down and hold you back in game. And then I'm going to answer it in an advanced way, how to actually use them as inspiration and motivation and actually get better because of them. So that's coming at the end. So first, the intermediate perspective. And for this, I want you to take a long-term perspective. I want you to understand that over the course of your game career, if you'll think of it that way, you're going to do a certain amount of approaches, you're going to have a certain amount of successes, and a certain amount of failures. And there's going to be a rough ratio depending on your skill level. And you're going to have to take a certain amount of failures to get to those successes. So the failures are actually part of the success. Right? If you're going to say, I want to have a new girlfriend in X amount of time, you basically at the same time are saying, I have to take this many failures and be okay with it. And in order to do that, I'm going to get this many phone numbers, this many dates, this many sexual experiences, and I'm going to get a girlfriend at the end of it. And that's just how it works. It's all part of the process, and you need to understand that the failures are a step in the process of succeeding. And there's a lot of ideologies about game early on that were actually designed around this. Like you may have heard an approach called a set. The reason why that term was created was to kind of dehumanize the experience a little bit, to make it less personal when you took a rejection. Instead of being like, I got rejected by a girl, it's like, no, that set didn't go my way. Right? It's much more kind of distant, and it's taking this long-term perspective into account. Or there's this other perspective that was proposed like back in the day, which was called the Star Trek holodeck perspective. The way that worked was basically in the TV show Star Trek, for those of you who aren't of the generation that ever watched that show, you're on a spaceship, and in order to entertain yourself, there's a thing called a holodeck where you can simulate any experience of the world. So you're like, I want to play tennis with Roger Federer, or I want to go walk in my favorite park, or I want to go, have an afternoon with my father, or whatever the heck it is. And so you have a computer creating a simulation for you, but you're in control of that simulation. You can start it when you want, you can end it when you want, and you don't take it personally. If you mess up a tennis shot, you're like, computer, redo simulation, right? So again, it's this mentality, this attitude of practice, this mentality that it's not to be taken super seriously because it exists in the moment and afterwards it's done. And that's the same with a rejection. If you've never met someone before, you walk up to them and you get a rejection and then you walk away, you're not in their life, they're not in your life, it's done. It's the same as if it never happened, right? And then you see another stranger, you start all over again, you start completely fresh, the other stranger doesn't know the previous one rejected you, you don't have to remember it, you're completely done. Actually, one of the other beautiful things about cold approach is any negative thing in your entire life history is wiped away the second you walk up to a new girl, because with that girl, you can be anyone and anything you want to be. You can be your best self if you just decide to be it. Now, if you decide to get hung up on the rejection that happened 2 hours ago and let that ruin your whole day, you certainly can, but why would you want to do that? It no longer exists. It's in the past. I'll give you a really, really brief story. I'll keep this very, very brief. But the story goes like this. There's two monks walking, and they're from a sect that you're not allowed to touch a female ever in there as part of their religion. And there's the old wise monk and then the young, inexperienced monk. And they see a woman kind of stranded in some water. And the young, inexperienced monk is like, what do I do? I'm supposed to help people, but I can't touch a woman. What the heck? The old wise monk immediately walks over, picks the woman up, saves her, puts her on the street, and then they walk on. For the young monk, it's festering and festering for him. It's eating away at him. And miles down the road, he says to his mentor, how could you do that? We're not allowed to touch women. And his mentor says to him, oh, are you still carrying her? I put her down miles ago. Okay, that's what you need to do about your rejections. You need to put them down miles ago. As soon as they're done, they are done. Don't carry them with you. Carry them with you exactly long enough to learn a lesson if there is one. If you got rejected and you did something wrong, oh, I got rejected because I did that thing wrong. All right, lesson learned, rejection forgotten. When I look back at my history in game, I actually cannot remember the failures. I remember the successes because they are memorable. This beautiful girl, this beautiful experience, this weekend spent doing amazing things, those are very memorable. The rejections are over like that, and once I've taken the lesson from them, they are no longer relevant enough to me to be remembered. And so I know that I've taken lots of rejections. I am mentally aware of it. I'm not like delusional. I know that I've taken the rejections, but if you ask me to remember rejections, I actually can't, right? I can remember a few that are funny, a few that were particularly poignant lessons, and a few that were rejections that I then turned around to success. Beyond that, I actually cannot remember them because they are that irrelevant. I put them down miles ago. I am no longer carrying them with me, right? Took the lesson, that was important. The rejection was not, and I moved on from it. And again, this long-term perspective. I knew going into this that I was going to take those rejections. So when that happened, it wasn't surprising to me. It wasn't catastrophic to me. It wasn't paralyzing to me. It was just the next extremely predictable step in the process. That happened. I knew it was going to happen. Okay, next step. That's the perspective you need to have. And that is the perspective that will keep the rejections from getting in your way and holding you back. However, for me, I go beyond that. I actually do better after a rejection than if I didn't get the rejection in the first place. And in order to explain that, I'm going to explain another phenomenon again very, very briefly. And the phenomenon is this. Oftentimes when I am filming students, we do filming and breakdown for students on boot camps and on my other programs, oftentimes the student is not taking enough risks in his approach. And then something happens. The girl says she has a boyfriend, or he tries for a close and hears no, right? And all of a sudden, in his mind, up until that moment, he was playing to not lose. And he was playing like he had something to lose. As soon as he got a rejection, as soon as things were not going his way, he suddenly said, oh, I have nothing to lose now. And he started actually going for it. He started actually taking risks. He started actually playing to win and going hard. And what happens shockingly in that moment is all of a sudden, good game starts coming out of his mouth. Up until then, he was timid and insecure and shy and had nothing to say. All of a sudden, he gets a rejection, good game starts coming out of his mouth. And basically, when I take a rejection, the same exact thing happens to me. My ego can no longer say, oh, I'm good at game because my last set sucked. And when my last set sucked, I now have nothing to lose, and I get inspired. I get inspired, and I want to go get a good set to make up for that last one. Right? I had the last one. It's in the past, it's gone, but that's my last memory of game. I'd rather have a good memory of game, so let me go create one. It gets me actually excited when I take a rejection. And if I take a rejection that was a close call, where like I almost succeeded and got rejected, oh man, then I really have the motivation, right? And so you can actually use a rejection as a seed to motivate you. You can use it as inspiration. You can use it as, I now have nothing to lose. I now have every reason to go for it, right? Now, it helps to have that perspective, that long-term perspective first, because fundamentally, when people are getting caught up in rejections, because they're getting too emotional. But once the emotions are healthy, right? If you have unhealthy emotions around rejection, yeah, you should try and tone down the emotions and treat it as long-term. But once you have a healthy perspective, once you have healthy emotions around rejection, rejection is actually a great thing. Rejection is actually exciting. Rejection is actually liberating and freeing because now you have nothing to lose. Now you have no ego to protect, and you can go out there and game your best. It's almost like the handcuffs are off, right? The chains are off. You are released in all your glory to go do your best game. And that's what it's like for me after I take a rejection. Now, unfortunately, you can say, I guess, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't take rejections as high a percentage as you guys, but I do still take them, and you better believe after rejection, the game you'll see is a thing to behold. So ideally, you can do that for yourself as well. But the baseline is you need to have that perspective. You need to understand that rejections are part of the process. They're expected, they're predictable, and don't get up in arms about them. Don't get angry about what you knew was going to happen when it inevitably happens. It's all part of the process, and if you don't take some rejections, you're never going to have successes.